Need to occur before the FDA is convinced that this drug is not safe, and the American people are tired of being guinea pigs because of the pharmaceutical companies' need for profit.
Many in academia did their best to sound the alarm about stimulant therapy as well. Barry Turner is a lecturer in law, specializing in medical law and medical ethics at Lincoln University and Leeds Law School in England. What he discovered while researching the science behind ADHD startled him.
What I found when I was investigating issues to do with both personality disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder was that there was a fundamental lack of scientific credibility. The materials generated were largely anecdotal. Most of the studies which purport to be scientific are spectacularly flawed, statistically and in content.
How so?
In particular, the most famous of the ADHD studies by Castellanos, where the control group is of a different age to the group that were being examined. This was a study which concluded that children with ADHD had smaller brains than a normal group. It transpired that the control group was 2 to 3 years older than the research group, and that the research group were in large part already medicated, and no account had been taken for the fact that the medication at the time is well known to cause brain atrophy. So I was not at all impressed that that research had been conducted correctly, scientifically, and a good number of papers have been written since confirming that.
When you say that it's well known to cause brain atrophy, well known by whom and in what studies?
It's well known in pharmacological studies. The drug is a psychostimulant, and psychostimulants cause brain atrophy.
So Ritalin, you're saying?
Ritalin, yes, and any other psychostimulant for that matter, not confined only to Ritalin.
This fact was raised at the infamous 1998 conference on ADHD, when neurologist Fred Bauman strolled to the microphone.
Dr. Swanson, why did you not mention that virtually all of the ADHD subjects in the neuroimaging studies have been on chronic stimulant therapy, and that this is the likely cause of their brain atrophy?
Well, that's a hypothesis. I don't know the exact numbers of how many were or were not on medication, and as I indicated, I understand that as a critical issue. And in fact, I'm planning a study to investigate that. Haven't yet done it.
And the reason I asked this question is that I was familiar with all of these studies, and I knew that all of the ADHD subjects had been on long-term amphetamine methylphenidate treatment, and that was the only physical factor involved in the situation.
Oregon State University looked at every possible long-term study they could find, over 2,000 studies. You know what they concluded? There's no good quality evidence that these drugs improve the lives of these kids, make them better students or whatever. Now think about that. We've got all these negatives with these drugs, including, for example, physical problems, cardiology problems, and then you even see things like shrinkage of brain, you see metabolic disorders showing up, diabetes, you know. Many kids suffer a psychotic episode placed on methylphenidate, which is Ritalin. There's a reason for that, it's well known.
I began to hear stories of children on these drugs dying. I began to hear stories of children on these drugs becoming drug addicted, of there being strokes and heart attacks in young children.
They go on methylphenidate, they suffer a psychotic episode, next thing you know they're labeled bipolar, then they're put on an antipsychotic drug, and now they're on a path to mental disability for life. Why? Because they fidgeted in school? We're going to end up here on an antipsychotic drug? Is that a good system?
We are not allowing children to mature. We are drugging them and arresting their psychological and their social development by ADHD, ADD, and bipolar drugging. It's an absolute damnable sin.
We don't even have the science, after 2,000 studies, that's saying it's improving them in school over the long term, academically. So where's the benefit? The benefit, according to the Oregon State University, is not there.
It would appear then that we have allowed the case for ADHD to be built on the shifting sands of adulterated science. Years later, the sleight of hand persists and the number of diagnoses grow.
I think the use of stimulant medication and antidepressants in children is just so out of control. I mean, our kids want to run around, they want to have fun, they don't want to pay attention all the time. And what we've done is we've created boxes, square boxes that we want to put these round holes into, and they just don't fit. I think we've just got the wrong attitude here. I mean, kids are kids, and my God, you know, the most important thing for a child to learn in school is that that child's a good person, and that that child can grow up and have fun in the world and be a responsible citizen and a good adult. And I think if we get back to that idea, we're going to do a lot. But this idea that some, you know, double-digit percentage of our children need medicine, I think we're just spitting in Mother Nature's face, and we're not listening.
Raising a child requires attentive presence. We have relinquished the kind of personal and direct care that actually utilizes the energy of our children for positive purposes. We're not capturing their energy creatively, and instead, oftentimes what we're doing is stifling it. Now, I'm not saying that sometimes for extremely out of control hyperactive kids, use of some carefully monitored psychological or chemical intervention is unwarranted. But what I am saying is that there's a tremendous overuse of that chemistry.
Here in Ritalin Nation, more than 1 in every 30 Americans between 5 and 19 years old have a prescription for methylphenidate to control their behavior. Use of stimulants have become so commonplace in Atlanta that at least 1/3 of their male students use Ritalin, Adderall, or Concerta daily. Throughout Georgia, thousands of school-aged girls took up the habit also. Brooke Reynolds was one of them.
When teachers would come to me and say, oh, I have concerns about student A, and they would throw out diagnoses such as, I'm wondering if they have attention deficit disorder, or, whatever diagnosis they had heard on Dateline the night before, I would have to kind of talk to them about, what that really meant and how they might want to address it in the classroom. Given today's educational settings, it's very difficult for teachers if they have children who are a little bit disruptive or who don't seem to be paying attention. And so all this pressure that's being put on teachers today then gets transferred to the kids who don't quite fit the typical classroom model student that we want, the student who's sitting in their chair, eyes at the teacher or at the blackboard, that kind of profile.
I have such children referred to me by their schools and by their family practitioners, having been sent there by their schools, and I saw these children. I myself would take a careful history, do a careful exam. I could find nothing wrong with them, and yet they were being called abnormal, diseased, chemically imbalanced by, of all persons, school teachers.
No one would question for a moment that teachers have the most challenging and important of professions, and that most are dedicated to their students in profound ways. Others, however, seem to practice medicine without a license by routinely diagnosing children as ADHD, based on vague behavioral traits. All too often, parents have been accomplices in this troubling and historic cultural shift.
When I would tell these patients and their families that I could find nothing wrong, I was increasingly met by persons from the educational establishment with the response, well, if you can't find the ADHD, if you can't find something wrong with them, if you won't write the Ritalin prescription, we know someone who will.
Over the course of the past 8 years, I've come into conflict with outside professionals or even other school psychologists who often make that recommendation that the child be evaluated by a pediatrician for medication. And so my role has been to try to educate other professionals, but also, more importantly, the parents about what the diagnosis is, the issues with the medication, and try to give them as much information as they can before making any kind of decision about what they want to do for their particular child. And sometimes that's gotten me into some conflicts.
Oftentimes, the report comes home from a teacher that little Johnny has this disorder or that disorder, and we take that too seriously. We are